Welcome to another episode of Backstage with Stagehand. We've been, I think this is the fifth one of these that we've recorded. And my name is Derek, I'm with Stagehand. And Stagehand is a company that's really focused on the local live music scene in particular. And so I've had an opportunity through this to talk to club owners, musicians, people in the industry. And so today I'm thrilled to be joined by Sonia Deleo. And Sonia and I have actually kind of been in each other's orbit for literally years now. We've traded emails, we've had a few conversations, and I've watched you perform and that sort of thing. But this is the first time I've actually had an opportunity to sit down and chat with you. So
it's exciting.
I'm looking forward to this. So why don't, so welcome, first of all. Welcome to the Ironwood. We're here at the Ironwood. So why don't we just dive into it? Normally the way I like to start is just get a bit of background about you and where did this all start from you? Because I know that you're a musician, but you also do a lot more than that in the arts. So just tell us a little bit where this started for you.
Sure. So I always tell the story that I was a very shy kid, and extremely, I call myself a shy extrovert, actually. And until about 11 years old, and I grew up going to church, Catholic church, and I knew I liked music, but I didn't think it was something that was for me ever at all. And I remember at about 11 years old, grade 5, 6, I don't know how I ended up in the choir, but I ended up in the church choir. Now I was the youngest person in the church choir by a lot. And we had this like little choir and this organist, and her name is Marie, and there are two people that I sort of attribute or sort of like credit for giving for pulling me out of my shell a little bit and showing me what music was for me. And so she was one of them. And I started singing in the choir, and I stood in the back and I blended in, and I loved it. Right. But I didn't want anyone to hear me or anything like that. And she slowly started telling me, like, you should do a solo, which meant at our church going to the front of the whole thing and like singing by yourself, right? And well, the organ was being played from
and
up above.
At 11 years old.
At 11, 12 years old. But she started telling me this right away, and I always resisted. I said, no, absolutely not. You got the wrong girl. Not going to happen. And she eventually forced me to do it, basically. But she knew something I did not know yet. And and I remember completely royally screwing up every single time, being so nervous that like my thing when I'm nervous is that my teeth go completely numb and it feels like they don't exist in my mouth. Oh, wow. And so that's when I started noticing that. But yeah, I messed up all the time for a while, and but she kept making me do it.
So you messed up when you were in front of the congregation?
Oh yes, when I was in front of everyone, I never ever did it totally right, and that is just a great lesson in general. But then I went to grade 7, and I started junior high, and for the first time ever, I had a real music teacher, where we went to music class, and she was trained to teach that, and she was a really good piano player. Her name was Miss Crisco, and she's the other one that I always say helped a lot with that. So I was by now like singing in church a little bit, but she, on like the 3rd day of school, she had us all stand up, and there was some song that we all kind of knew, a pop song or something, and we all were singing, and she walked between the rows, just listening to each person. And she stopped in front of me and she goes, "You're gonna do a solo." I was like, nope, no, not here, not in junior high. No, I'll do that at church, but I will not do that here. And by the end of grade 7, I was the lead role in the school musical. Wow. And it just kind of spiraled from there. But she was the same. She just persisted and then gave me little tasks here and little tiny solos here and there. And then, so musical theater became a big thing. My high school after that was also had a really great theater and musical theater program. So same thing, I was in every show every year for my whole high school career.
Wow.
And then I went to Mount Royal. Then I moved here from Ontario and went to Mount Royal
So
for
you
theatre.
didn't grow up here in Calgary?
I did not. No, I grew up in Thunder Bay, Ontario.
Thunder Bay. Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
So sorry. So then you moved here after high school?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did your family move here? Or you moved here on your own?
No, I moved here on my own, yeah, after I graduated. However, my mom was raised here, so there's a bunch of family. So I actually did live with an aunt and uncle when I first arrived.
Okay, so not completely
Not
intimidating.
completely alone, no.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
So, and when did you start to play, like I know you play guitar, and did you start that about the same time?
You know what? I got a guitar, a very secondhand guitar. My parents got me in high school, and I must have expressed an interest, but I remember having a friend teach me like 3 chords, and I would fiddle around with it, but I never had any patience for the silly thing, and I let it go. Like once I came and went to school, I didn't bring the guitar. I just let it go and didn't play for a long time. And it was only, I would say I've been playing guitar seriously for about 6 years maybe now.
Okay.
And 2 or 3 where I really like hunkered down, bought myself a good one, and decided to be okay at it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And when did you start writing music?
That's interesting because I wrote my very first song around 11 as well. But we had, it's funny, this story, it was very formative and it caused a lot of writer's block. But so I woke up in the middle of the night, and this is still something that happens to me now. But as like a 10, 11-year-old, I woke up, I remember in the middle of the night, and I was like, there's a song in my head. and I ran through the dark house and found a piece of paper, and I wrote the whole thing down.
Right.
And in the morning I read it, and I was like, this might be okay. Like, I don't know. It was a love song, and anyway, but at the time, like I was super nervous about that. I was not a songwriter, so I didn't think it was probably not okay, you know. And so I decided to just fold it up and keep it. We had this sitter who was like 15, 16, who would come take care of us from time to time, and so I kept it, and I was like, she's the authority on what's cool and what's good, so I will show her first, and if she likes it, then I'll go from there. Right. And so I kept that thing in my pocket, and it became like, it was tattered. By the time I saw her again, it was like all, because I would open it and I'd read it again, and I'd be like, yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah.
And then, so finally she shows up at the house one time, and I pulled her up to my room, and I said, okay, I have to show you this. I think I wrote a song. And I handed it to her. I opened it up and I handed it to her, and I just remember just like this, like I was nervous, and I just can see my little self like beaming, just waiting for her response, right? And she read it quietly in front of me, and then she looked up at me and she said, "It's stupid." And so I took it from her, and I crumpled it up, and I threw it in the garbage.
Oh, no.
And I decided that I was not a writer.
Wow.
And it was like, honestly, there were times in college, in creative writing, I took some, aside from theater, my options were all in writing areas, and I was completely blocked from that one instance.
Wow.
Where I through that time sort of freed that up with some other teachers and stuff, but it was
and looking back on it now,
impactful.
after having written a lot of songs, how do you feel about, do you remember the song? Do you have
So no, I do not, and I feel like this is what I wonder is like, I wonder if I wrote it again. I wonder if it is a song or it's a piece of it or something. I wonder if it's there somewhere. I don't know. I might never know. But.
And I'm curious, just the whole process of writing for you. You said you wrote down the lyrics. I assume. Did you also write down the chords? Were you thinking that way, or was it almost more poetry?
At that time, not at all. That was just words for me. I had a melody in my head. I remember having like a way that I thought it would go. But now I think it's always kind of been that way for me. Most of the time, songs come to me as words first, as a story, as a poem, whatever. Yeah. And then I add music. Often there's a melody already, or at least a piece of one, and yeah. But it's usually the whatever the lyrics are going to be first. Yeah.
Cool. So you went to Mount Royal, you studied theater, and then what happened after that?
And then after that, I was there for 1 year, and I left and had the opportunity to move to Jasper, Alberta. I had an aunt who owned a restaurant there.
Oh, wow.
She invited my sister and I to come and work for her. And I had no plan. So I did that. We both did. And we traveled out there, and I remember thinking, I actually didn't know where it was because I had only been in Calgary for 1 year, and I told everyone I was moving to BC.
Kind of knew where Banff was, but
but I had no clue. Yeah, and I remember on the drive there thinking like, do they have a hospital? Like it just felt so far from everything, and it was. And then I ended up there for like 9 years off and on. Yeah.
Wow. Mm-hmm. And did you pursue music there?
Yeah. Well, I arrived in Jasper, and I quickly realized that there was a little bit of music going on. There was zero theater arts of any sort, no other performing arts at the time. There had been an old theater company that used to do sort of nature content, but that was done. And there was a lot of visual artists in town and stuff, and a gallery, but I knew quickly that I would not last there if I didn't have ways to express all of that. So, so I started a theater company, which was like a crazy undertaking at 20 years old with zero experience being a leader of any sort.
And where did you, like, where was your theater? Like, where did you put these productions on?
Yeah, well, the first one was very, we did it wherever we could.
Right.
So there was a stage in like the community hall, in like a big gymnasium basically, and there were also a couple of other small venues that we used. There was a pub with risers that we did a show in. The Legion had a stage. We took what we could get.
That's awesome.
It was great. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So you've done a lot of things, obviously, music, theater. I'm always curious, moments that stand out for people, memories that you might have, whether it's a performance, whether it's a theater production, or whether it's just some moment that for some reason you remember that meant something to you. Anything that jumps out at you?
Yeah, on the train of the theater company, the very first show I did, so what I decided was that I would just hold open auditions. And I called on one of my instructors from Mount Royal and asked him if he would mentor me. So I came down to Calgary and I had a lunch with this guy.
Okay.
We decided on a script that was, only a 6-person cast, so it would be easy-ish. And the process from there was crazy. That was the extent of his involvement. But I just kind of went for it, and I had, people came to auditions. And I'm like, wow, look at that. And then each like sort of step in the process was just hard and new and scary, and it was a lot of work, and we worked for months to do 2 shows. We did only 2 nights, and by the time we had a hotel donate the space for us to practice in if we would do the show there and let people drink. It was, we had to we ended up having a business that donated posters, and it became a community thing. People bought in after a while, but when I first showed up, I was just Sonia who wants to do a play. I didn't have a company, I didn't have anything.
Yeah.
They had no proof that I had any clue what I was doing. So then we get to this point where we have 2 shows planned, and my hope was for 40 to 50 people a night would have made me so happy. Right. In a town of 5,000 in November. And we got 90 a night.
Wow.
And the hype to do a 3rd show, but I didn't. I was like, nope, I'm gonna quit while I'm ahead. This is great, this is so great. But anyway, it was the beautiful part. And the part that always stands out for me is that the actors at that point, the hope was, because I funded the whole thing myself. So I was serving at my aunt's restaurant and then funding this.
Wow.
And so and that was renting spotlights from Edmonton that had to be brought in, all kinds of things. And so the idea was to pay myself back, break even, and then I was gonna just give the rest of the money to the actors. And on the last night, they all got together and came to me and said, we don't want the money.
Wow.
This was amazing, this was super fun, give it to someone else. And so we had decided we would give it that it would be donated in some way, the extra, and we ended up handing over $750 cash to a family, a local family that I'd heard about, and who was like just struggling with, oh no, sorry, it wasn't November. It was like leading up to school starting, and school supplies were going to be an issue and stuff. So we just gave this money. We never told anyone. We just did it. And I think like just the way that all came around, and I just remember feeling just so proud of the whole thing and all the people and the fact that it worked like that. So that moment for me was great in that it strengthened my belief that I could lead.
Yeah.
You know?
Interesting. So let's talk a little bit more about your music background. So when did you? So it sounds like you kind of had a theater focus there for a while, and then you eventually came back to Calgary, obviously.
Right. I did actually start a band in Jasper.
Oh,
I did sing there quite a bit.
Okay.
Actually, yes. And there was a town choir, and I sang in that. But yeah, so I was in I guess my first like actual band was there in Jasper, and it was great. We were together for about a year, and things kind of got rolling. And once we got to the point where there was like money being made and decisions to make, there was a couple people who clashed hard.
Oh, really?
And it just kind of crumbled. Yeah.
So
but it was a great first experience.
Yeah. So then and when did you come back to Calgary?
January 2013.
2013. Okay.
Yeah.
And did you do any theater here? Or did you sort of refocus on the music side of things?
Yeah. Well, I'd been with the theater company. I'd been like directing and producing for so long and sort of in charge of stuff. So when I came back to Calgary, I knew that I wanted to get back into performing again, and I knew that music would be a big part of that, but also, the acting and I missed that part. I missed being on the stage. So so I did do a little bit of theater. I worked with Urban Curves, which was a feminist theater company at the time, and Swallow a Bicycle, and I did some like smaller indie stuff, and then and I also have 2 kids, and they were like 5 and 3 at that point, and so it was a busy time. And though I had a lot of support here, because by then my family was here, my parents and stuff.
Oh, were they? So they moved here from Ontario?
Yeah. Right around just before I had kids, yeah. So that was great, but it just was very time consuming. And then music sort of started to happen more, and I ended up in a duo a few years into being back in Calgary with Natalie Inga, who
that's the Fig and the Flame.
The Fig and the Flame, yes,
right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Is that still
and
going?
That was kind of the beginning of it really being a professional thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So what about so from a music perspective, any particular performance that stands out for you there? And I'm curious how that might compare to your experiences with theater.
Yeah, so many. There are so many. I've had some really beautiful, beautiful times. And I feel lucky for all of it. But there was a point right before we started that duo. I was doing a little bit of solo. I opened for I played my very first half-hour set in Cochrane at, oh no, I'm not going to remember the name. What's that guitar cafe? Do you remember? Do you know?
Oh, I do know.
It doesn't exist anymore.
I've been there. Yeah, it closed about 2 years ago, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've forgotten now.
Okay, but we. So I had played and opened for this band of friends. Actually, my cousin was one of the people in the other band, and so we were back in Cochrane the next day. It was Saturday, and we were taking down and getting all the gear out because we were allowed to leave it there overnight. And so it was like a really cool accomplishment. I was feeling super good about that. But in the meantime, about a week and a half before, I had got a message from my sister who lived in Vancouver, and she said that she saw on Twitter that Royal Wood. Do you know who Royal Wood is? He's a Toronto singer-songwriter.
The name is familiar.
Yeah. Great artist. He was touring at the time, and he was tweeting. He had tweeted that he was looking for a singer in Calgary to join him for one of his songs. That's a duet between a male and female voice. And so, so she, a week and a half before this show, had said, like, "Are you free on Saturday? The whatever. I'm gonna submit you. Like, I'm gonna give them your name." And I was like, "Oh, sure." And I really did not. And then I didn't hear anything. So that was fine. And that would have been the day after this Cochrane show. So we're there on Saturday afternoon, and all of a sudden my phone rings, and we're sitting in a restaurant. I'm exhausted. I have not showered since the show. And I remember we all just felt quite disheveled but blissful. And we were waiting for our food in this restaurant, and my phone rings, and it's my sister, and she goes, "Oh my God, Royal Wood wants you to sing tonight. Sound check is in an hour. What are you doing?"
Did you even know what the song was at this time?
I had listened to it once when she told me about it to decide if I wanted to sing it or not, and that was it, because I didn't hear from them. I thought it would be a quick, So, so no, I did not know the song. And so that set into, so I was like, yes, I will be there. I will be there. And so my friend Craig, who was the drummer for this band, he was like, okay, I'll come with you and just like make sure you get everywhere. Like, okay. So I had to, like, in my mind, I would be singing backup essentially with Royal. Like, I didn't know at all what this was going to look like.
Yeah.
It was at the Grand downtown.
Okay.
And so I was like, black clothes. So I drove to my house. I lived in Cochrane at the time. So I grabbed an armload of all the black clothes I had. Again, hadn't showered. Grabbed a thing of dry shampoo. I dove back into Craig's car, and we started driving to the city. And then I look at my phone, and my sister had said, "You have to call them when you're on your way." And I was like, okay. So I call, and I say, like, I'm gonna be there. I'm gonna be possibly a few minutes late because I'm coming from Cochrane, and it's like, anyways, we had to go through downtown, there was construction. Anyway, so they said, no problem, we'll see you when you get here. And so then I hang up from that phone call, and my phone dies. And I'm like, my plan was to learn the song on the way. But I hadn't properly thought that through, and there was no way at that time to charge my phone in the car. So I'm like, oh boy, okay. This is all I could do is look up the lyrics and hope for the best at this point. So, so then we got down to the venue, and Craig dropped me off, and I dove out of the car. I had my phone, I had a charger, I had written out the lyrics on the drive, and so I'm like, I just hope I have a few minutes to look this over, listen to it once or something, and. So I go into the theater, and the idea was that he would then pick me up so I could go back to his house, which was close to downtown, change, and get ready and whatever. And so I go into the building, and I get walked immediately down to a green room, and they were like, yeah, just hang out here for a bit. And I was alone, and I was like, okay, yeah, cool, no problem, sounds good, nice to meet you. And then they closed the door, and I'm plugging everything in, just frantically trying to and I'm listening. I got the song playing on loop, and I'm just sitting, I just sat there, and I'm listening and practicing the harmonies, and it's all harmonies, and they changed, and it was a beautiful song. But and the lyrics, I was like, well, I'm just gonna have to have my phone with the lyrics for the sound check, but then I'll learn it in between. Yeah. so then
just in time information.
Yep. And so just as I'm in the middle of all of that, they come knock on the door, and it was not very much time, and they said, okay, he's ready for you now. And I'm like, great.
So this was a live performance?
This was a live performance
in front of an audience?
At the Grand, in front of an audience. Yes,
wow.
Absolutely. It was crazy. And so the sound check went great, but I had the lyrics in front of me, and harmonies are something I know. So I might not have even sung the ones he wrote, but I sung something that worked. And so then I meet the band, etc. I'm again just really trying to play it cool. I've got a toque covering the horrible hair I have. I'm just and then I casually walk out. I'm like, okay, I'll see you at my call time or whatever. And go out the front door. I'm like, Craig, where are you? It was so funny. And he came and picked me up, and we went back to his house, and he had my food that I never ate from the restaurant earlier that day, and put the song on repeat, and I just listened to it super loud while I again sang it while I got ready. And sort of tried to freshen myself up. But while that's happening, I get a message from Royal himself. He texts me and he goes, "What are you doing? Would you like to join me in the band for dinner before the show?" I was like, I can't. I was so... and I just remember, just the whole thing was just so crazy. And anyway, I had to say no. I was like, unfortunately, I had to come and take care of some things. I'm like, I forget what I said, but it was pretty chill and mysterious. And and then I got back to the venue on time, and we both got tickets, and we sat in the crowd until it was a song or two before the song, and I went down, and I was like, wow. still had my phone, still looking at the lyrics. I'm like, this point, it is what it is. And it went well.
It went well?
Quite well, yeah. They were happy. It was all right.
Cool.
It wasn't as good as the sound check, but it was fine.
That's
but
cool.
also, they had me freaking front. This is what I found out in the sound check too, was that I was the front of the stage, right in the middle. He's like, no, we're showcasing you. And I'm like, oh, even better. Would have been nice to wash my hair. But, yeah. Anyway,
wow.
That story will always be. And that, I tend to live, I don't know. I do that a lot. I say yes to things, and then I figure out how the heck I'm going to make it happen. Yeah, and it leads me to some pretty cool places.
That's cool. So one of the things that Stagehand is all about is really, obviously we love coming to the Ironwood. We love, any of the live music venues in town to see artists like yourself perform. But we're also trying to innovate on just opportunities for musicians, for live music in general. And that led us, a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago, to the airport. And really the value proposition, as we say, is all about customer experience. Because as you can imagine, airports can be stressful places. People are traveling for various different reasons. Oftentimes people have anxiety around flying. And so the airport was starting a live music program. And I know that you performed there a number of times. So I'm really curious from a musician's perspective what that was like, and I'd love to hear any stories or experiences that you might have there as well. So what drew you to the airport? I suppose that's a bit of an unusual place to play, is it not, or is that?
Yeah, no, it is. It's very unusual. And when I'd never seen music in airports before. I'd never heard of such a thing. But when I heard about it, it was a hard yes for me immediately because I love the airport and I love people and people watching, and I think that the airport just has so many stories and there's just so much going on, and there's like good and bad, and there's lots of reasons to fly somewhere, and I think that I've always loved the atmosphere. And so I thought, like, if I get to do my favorite thing in my favorite place, I'll do that. And so and I didn't know what it would entail and the impact it would have, but the amount of people who stopped to talk, the people who left notes in my guitar case or nearby or handed me things. For example, a mom, she had 2 little tiny kids. She was traveling by herself, and she sat in front of me and fed them snacks while they climbed all over the place, and they were messy and they were getting stuff everywhere, and she left me a note after, and she said, like, thanks for being a little piece of, like,
wow,
light in this crazy, crazy day that I'm having. And just, there was once a woman who sat across the hallway from me, so against the far wall, and she sat down at the beginning of my set and she stayed for 2 hours.
Wow.
And she cried most of the time.
Wow.
And I never ever knew why. But she came, when I was done, she came over and she gave me a hug. She was still crying, and I gave her a hug, and we were quiet and there were no words, and then she walked away. And to me, like, there were just some really beautiful interactions. A little girl from China told me that she hopes I become a singer. And she left me a note as well. Like, there were so many amazing things,
I find that it just completely changes the atmosphere in the mood.
It does, and that's what I heard a lot. Yeah, a lot of people were like, what a good idea, as they walked by, I only had one bad experience.
Oh, is that right?
Because also the airport is a stressful place. And
it is.
Some people who are in a funk don't want you to try and make it better.
Right.
And this man one time walked by, and he stopped right in front of me, like I'm singing right here, and he just came right up to me and he goes, "Ugh, stop!" He just moved on. I was like, "Oh, I'm sorry, your day's hard." It was very funny.
Yeah.
But overall, just so many nice interactions
and what I've found, because I've talked to a number of the musicians that have played out there, is it really is the skills, or there's a different angle on the skills that you're developing. There's a different reason, if you like, and I've heard this from the folks at the airport too, that the musicians that do really well there recognize that this is different than being on the stage at the Ironwood.
Absolutely.
You're there for a different reason. Can you talk about that at all? Like, does that make sense to you? I know Devin Cooper, for example.
Yeah.
When I was talking to him, he said, he knows that he's really got a very short period of time to make a connection with somebody. So as they're walking down and walking by,
yes.
If he can make that connection, it creates a moment versus
Exactly.
just walking on by and catching your flight and that sort of thing. And does that resonate with you? Is that did you have a similar experience?
Yeah, I think it was interesting. I feel like there was a period of sort of figuring that out at the beginning, but I loved it. Right, again, in my shows in general, connecting with the audience has always been important to me. It's always like relatively interactive, and I don't like there to feel like there's something between us that prevents us from knowing each other. So it's so at the airport, I found it. I agree. There was this neat. You had these tiny chances. And people you would never otherwise run into, who would never otherwise know your name, or it was, it created lots of little moments. And I know like some of us musicians talked amongst ourselves about what it was like for each of us, and people had different experiences, and I found it usually quite pleasant. But then there were days where the airport was like the weather was bad and everyone was mad, and like that vibe was hard to play through sometimes.
Right.
And but helpful for some. But then it could be it depended on what was happening around in the atmosphere. You had to like adapt every single time. Sometimes there were times where you just sort of had to keep to yourself, and that was, you just kind of knew that was just the vibe of the day. But often it was more of that, smiling and I think, it was my parents actually. They came back from somewhere, and I forget who was playing, but someone else was playing, and my mom smiled at her, and she did not smile back, and my mom was like, what? And I said, well, who knows? Who knows? That could be a number of things. She could have been thinking of lyrics. See, it's not you. But that was an interesting thing to learn, because I thought like every single person matters was how I ended up sort of approaching it in the end, was like every single one of them. So they might not look at me, but I'm going to look at all of them. And I'm going to try and connect with my eyes, with a smile, with a word, whatever.
And it's interesting, because one of the things that I'm quite proud of from a stagehand standpoint is that we've helped places like that who are not music bookers. That I'm sure you dealt with Peggy and Jocelyn and maybe others, but the reality is their business is in has been all around the airport. It hasn't been running a club like the Ironwood, and I also feel like it's valuable for them to be the ones that are programming the talent that should be performing at the airport, because they know the airport as probably better than anyone, and know what will be appropriate for as a musician and how you'll do in a setting like that. So I think it's important to enable those people to effectively behave like music bookers.
Absolutely. And I think for them, I think there was definitely a learning curve at the beginning for everyone, and there was figuring out how to communicate effectively with each other, because we're talking music and they're talking not that, and we're trying to meet halfway and have everyone sort of feel good about the spot we were playing in, or how the equipment was stored, and all of these things that it was neat to. I'm all for, and this is something I like about what you guys are doing, is that this educating new people understand what it means to be a performer, and what it means to hire one, and what the value in that is, and because there's just a lot of blank spots, I feel, blind spots that people. It's just nice. It's nice for there to be a wider spread knowledge of what this business is and what it means to us.
Well, and I think also important is bringing the music out to places and people that may not otherwise experience it. Because I think we all know that, if you spend any time at the Ironwood or the Blues Can or Mikey's, you know, there's a lot of people that are already in that scene
Exactly.
and are comfortable walking in the front door and what a performance is all about and that sort of thing. But unfortunately, there's a lot of people that's just something that's completely new to them.
Yes.
And I think if you can bring the music to where the people already are, and maybe it gives them an opportunity to go, you know what, man, we should go see some live music this weekend, and then they actually get off the couch and come down. So
yeah,
I think there's a bunch of different angles that
sure.
make it good to bring it out to the people.
Yes, I agree.
Let's talk about just places that you might have played, maybe a favorite club location, anything that jumps to mind when I say one of your favorite spots to play?
Yeah. Well, the place we're sitting in. It's funny, the Ironwood, so I did my very first headline show here last year, 2019 in May. And I 3 years-ish before that, I remember sitting at a show in the audience watching and thinking, even at that point, only 4-ish years ago, I was like, I wonder if I can do that.
Yeah.
Like, I wonder if I'll ever play here just like with my own thing, my own project. And boom, I was here last year and again this year.
That's
and
cool.
I think, so there was always like a massive value. I love this venue. The sound has always been some of the best in the city. It's like, you know, they do it right. You're treated well. It's a nice, it's a good gig. And so, and I had played, so leading up to, so in that time from like, I wonder if I can do this, to doing it, I played, you know, a songwriter circle. I opened for several people. I just kind of kept harassing Pat until he finally gave me a chance. But yeah, it's this venue is one of my favorites for sure, and it just feels like history, and it feels like community, and it feels good. Yeah.
It's interesting. It's interesting you mentioned community because I think it was Sylvia Johnson from Cornerstone that I was talking to, and she mentioned the Ironwood as well, and I think she used that exact same word, is community.
Yeah.
And but I'm curious, like, what does that mean to you as a musician? Like, what is community? Why? I guess I'm always trying to figure out, what makes a great live music venue?
A live music venue. I guess this just feels like a hub, first of all. This feels like the place that everyone plays. And there's something about sort of being in that club that just feels good, whether you know all the people or not. And I think Calgary is interesting to me because I've spent a little bit of time in Vancouver and a little bit of time in Toronto, and we are still a bit segregated compared to some places. And I like to try and work on that personally by going to other people's shows, by going to other genres shows. But in Calgary, we do not mix as well and support each other and lift each other up quite as well.
From a musician community standpoint?
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And I know that a lot of people agree with that. And there is a little bit of if you're new here, it takes a while to get in,
to break in.
And it's unfortunate because that's not the point. To me, it's never been the point. And you know, I'm playing in Toronto. There was I showed up at an open mic, for example, and there were every genre you could imagine. First of all, and secondly, they play with each other. They book a show that's like this indie folk artist and this rapper are gonna do and we just don't do that well in Calgary yet, and I have hope that we are working on it, and I think there have been some things recently. Quite frankly, I'm grateful for COVID because I feel like it leveled the playing field in a sense, and we understand each other. There's a different vibe now, and I think that there's a gratefulness. Like, it's this kind of feeling like every chance you get to play now is special. Like, it's like, oh man, like everyone's just happy to be back in it. And when the Ironwood fundraiser happened the first weekend, I came down, and it was my first time being here, first time being like kind of in the...
Since COVID hit.
Since COVID. And I remember just walking in and feeling at home, and I saw people that I hadn't seen in ages, and I'm not terribly close with all of them, but there was just this, everyone was so grateful to see each other and so supportive and happy to just be here and and it just happened to be here. But it was this like seeing everyone again, it feels like something has shifted a little bit. I feel like we all felt this vulnerability, and we realized that we kind of have to lean on each other a little bit, and we kind of have to be a community. And I hope that I'm right, and I hope that it continues to sort of go that way, and we don't lose sight of it. But
any thoughts on why that might be? You mentioned other communities that just seem to mix more.
I think there's a combination of things. I think I don't know why. I don't know why to start with, but I think people leave Calgary a lot. I mean, Vancouver, Toronto, Montreal, there are hubs of music. There are just places that have a richer and longer and wider music history than we do. And I think there's so much good here, but there's also like, it's hard to know about it. It's hard to hear when it's happening. There's a little bit of a lack of, which you guys have helped a lot with. But I do still hear all the time from people who are not musicians, like, I just don't know where to go. I'm like, what? Of course. Like, there's only, really at this point. But I think as far as like musicians and the community itself, I think, people get to a certain point where they're like, I want to feel more a part of something, and they take off.
Yeah.
And so it'd be nice to keep, and I mean, some people don't, and there is a community, but and there are times when everyone comes together, but it's definitely, it's got walls between it, and there's just, it's different. It's different. It feels very different than the other cities.
Interesting. Can we talk about your new album you're working on?
Sure. Yeah.
I think I saw on your website the name, something about monsters. I'm trying to remember now.
Love Notes to the Monsters.
Love Notes to the Monsters.
Yeah.
So, and you've got a song called Monsters.
Correct.
So is that feeding on? I'm just wondering, is there some sort of a connection with you and monsters?
Definitely. Definitely.
Tell me about that.
Well, the song itself, I wrote. It's never been released. There's a live video, but that's it. And that song was kind of a combination of things. It was about the anxieties, doubts, fears that like hide in the back of your mind, in all of our minds, and like sneak up sometimes when you least expect it, or you think something starts to not go well, and then all of a sudden this is like feeding it as well. And it's that little voice, it's the thing in your head that wants to sabotage all the happiness, and we all have it. And for me, I was realizing like that thing happens almost more when things are going well, and like it just, anyways. So I wanted to write. Monsters was kind of a song where I was like, there was this darkness to the way I was thinking about all of that, and I realized that I was, in my writing up until that point, I always tried to make it a little more palatable. I always tried to pretty things up a smidge so that no one got uncomfortable or worried about me or anything like that.
Right.
And I was like, but that's not the truth. And so Monsters was a song that was kind of like, okay, what happens if I just tell the truth? Like, what happens if it's the song itself has this trajectory from like sort of a dark to light, which shows up in a few other songs of mine, where this sort of like, they're there. Yeah. The darkness is there, but and it's good to acknowledge it, but also not to sit in it for too long, and like keep pointing your face toward the sun. This is something a little thing I always say to people too, is just like, just point your face to the sun, and like it'll work out.
So the whole idea of Love Note to the Monsters is making friends with that?
Yeah, kind of making friends with it, and just. That idea came just this summer, actually, on a road trip, where it's kind of all these. The songs will be a combination of the trouble spots, but also like the nice times, and it's kind of about trying to have no expectations and move forward, just always move forward, whether no matter what's happening, kind of. So yeah, that's a loose idea of what it is, but it did come from that. And Monsters specifically, and the lyrics at the beginning of that song come from when I was a kid. I had this recurring daymare, I call it. So anxious thoughts, really. But at the time, like, we didn't know. There was no name for that. There was no name for that, right? You were just an imaginative child.
Yep.
But I definitely was a deep, like a big thinker as a kid. And I had this thing for a period of time where I believed that there were these monsters made of mud who would show up at my bedroom window and look in at nighttime after I went to bed, and they were like dripping, like they were just constantly oozing, and they didn't have faces. And they would check on me, and if I was sleeping in the correct position, they would let me be and they'd move on. But if I was ever not sleeping in the right position, they would take me away somewhere, away from my family. So this is like a big scary period of time. But now, so like at the beginning of the song, it's the first few lines are, there are monsters in the moonlight, they've got mud beneath their nails, they've been crawling up the cold banks of this river that you sail. And so it's just this, it's that they are there, they're on the periphery, they want to scare you, but you don't always have to like buy in.
Right.
So, yeah.
That's cool. So I know the recording an album can be a bit of a fluid process, but do you time box something for yourself? Say, I want this out by spring, or like, how does that work for you?
I have committed to a timeline so I've applied for some grants and so I've had to sort of make a really concrete plan. But outside of that, and sort of if those don't happen, I am doing it myself. And so I spent a lot of COVID learning how to produce my own music and record my own music. So I have this little studio that my friend, this awesome friend of mine, built in her house for me because I was, running into issues with my house being too noisy and things, and she was like, nope, no more excuses, here you go. You have a perfectly fine place to do it now. And so it's amazing and like one of the best gifts ever. And so I've been in there a lot in the last couple of weeks. I've just sort of begun, and I have 2 fully tracked songs that I'm working through, and I'm gonna need some help. I definitely can't do all of the editing and mixing myself yet, but it's exciting and it feels really good to be. I didn't think this was something I was interested in at all. I thought I was just performer and all of that. Someone else can do it. It's, and it is nice to have other people who really know what they're doing to do those things, but it's also going to be nice for me to have a different kind of engagement in that and to be able to talk the talk and understand all the lingo and know what moves I want to make and stuff. Mm-hmm.
That's cool. So are you writing while you record, or have you basically got it all, what you want to record, you just need to get it down now?
Yeah, I have most of it. It's all ready. So, and I've been, playing for a few years as like after the duo ended in 2017, late 2017, I think, or 2018, I don't know. But for a couple of years now, I've been on my own, and I've been playing all this music, and I never have, I play a show and people are like, so where can I find the music? And I'm like, oh yeah, about that. And so and it's not masses, but it's enough people that I was like, you know what, it's time to sort of put some of this somewhere. So,
cool.
Yeah.
I'm looking forward to hearing it.
Thank you.
Let's just talk about the industry in general. Anybody, you've been here for, I guess you said 2013 is when you came back to Calgary. Anybody that you look up to in the local industry, call it a mentor or somebody that that you've really worked with, or?
Mentor. That's an interesting question. I mean, there are people who, it's funny, when you say that, I think of younger people than me. I think of people who have just gone for it and like owned their place in it all. And one person that comes to mind is Kate Stevens, actually.
Okay.
And I just find her,
voice.
I mean, her voice is naturally incredible. She works her little buns off, and she is just an infectious human being and just a lovely, warm, bright person. And I'm so excited. Like when I think about people that I look up to, I think about people who are fresh, who are just sort of like, they see it, they know it, and they're doing the thing. Yeah.
That's cool. So, and what about the unsung heroes? I always like to ask about this because we all know that there's front people, there's that often get a lot of the recognition or the press or the glory, but we all know that there are so many behind the scenes people as well. Anybody that jumps to mind for you?
Honestly, not specifically. I feel like this is sound engineers. People who do sound are just so overlooked, and
Right.
And like any chance to thank them and make sure that they know how much value they have is so important to me. And the Ironwood there are several places in town that have really great sound engineers, and it's very it's crucial. It helps so much, and it makes such a difference. And now that I have some experience under my belt, I'm like, okay, now I understand what a really great sound person is and what a really not great one is.
Right.
And we have some really great ones in Calgary, and I'm super grateful every time I get to work with them.
Yeah. So what excites you? It was interesting you mentioned about COVID. You're kind of grateful for COVID, which is awesome. But I'm curious, as you look at the music scene in general, you look at your career, you look at the people and what's going on here in Calgary, what excites you about, what keeps you going, what keeps you getting out of bed in the morning?
Oh boy. So many things. I will not stop. It's been, COVID on one hand has been sad because some people have stopped and some people have
Sure.
put it away for now, and that hurts my heart. But it's not an option for me, and I knew that. I've known that all along. And music for me is like, there's something so much bigger that I cannot explain to anyone, that can be frustrating when I try. And I just realized recently, actually, that I might always be the only one that really gets what it means and what it is for me. So like kind of accepting that and being, because I don't know, when you hear stories of people who just are, there's just naysayers around every corner. There's, I run into a lot of, it's very interesting being a single mom at that, and like, there's a lot of judgment. Like if I'm at the school with the other moms, it's kind of like I'm weird and shiny, or there's this like, well, how do you do it? How do you you mustn't, like this, almost like you can't be a good mom and a good musician is
Right.
like the vibe that I feel sometimes from both sides. And so I just feel like I can't explain to those people like, you don't understand, I just don't have a choice.
Right.
And it's working in the sense that like I'm doing it to the degree that I can on any given day. And for me, like music is just it comes from somewhere bigger than me. It comes through me. Songs arrive out of nowhere. I feel lucky to be a part of it. And people seeing other musicians do their thing. Co-writing is a big one for me. And I do that a lot with a lot of different people, and I do it on purpose because it stretches me so much and teaches me things and pulls me out of my comfort zone, and I think everyone should do it. It can be super intimidating, but it's also really amazing because it just revives me it just like breathes a new bit of life into what I'm doing every single time I do it.
Yeah, That's cool. So why don't we maybe just wrap up and maybe just asking you a little bit more about what live music means to you. I think you've sort of touched on it here, and it's interesting as you were saying that. I was thinking about something I once heard Tom Phillips say, and it was a conversation in a performance, and there was some sort of discussion as part of that. And he said the one piece of advice he gave people was, don't do it unless you have to. And what he meant by that was he just has to, which I think is what I heard you say as well. It's like, I just have to, and I think that creates just a different, I guess, element to the music, that this is really just part of you, and you have to be something you get out. But I don't want to put too many words in your mouth. So, but tell me, what does live music just mean to you in general, if that's not too broad a question?
Sure. Well, I agree with him. And I think that's what I meant when I said it's hard to explain, is that if it's not something someone else has to do, then they're just never going to understand what that means to you. Yeah. And that's fine. And that goes across every single vocation you can think of. And yeah, I think it's live music, like the connection, the people. There's one experience that I remember being in an audience, and I had this moment when after I moved here, and it was like 2014, I think, and I was questioning. I was just obsessed with being with music, with all these things, and I was like, and with performing in particular, and I was like, why though? Is it my ego? Is it just that I need some sort of validation? Like, what am I looking for here? Right. And what I want to, if I'm going to do it, I want to do it for the right reasons. And I went to Sasquatch Festival in Washington, and I saw Sigur Rós play one night. They were headlining one of the nights, and I'm not sure if you're familiar, but look them up if you're not. But they had this. First of all, the stage was dark. It was it's in like a natural amphitheater outside. There's like a giant ravine behind it, and the sound is unbelievable. And they had only a few light bulbs on little black stands all over the stage, sort of lighting, so you could see their silhouettes from time to time. You'd see an instrument from time to time, but they did the whole show like that, basically in the dark. And I went right up, and I knew I was a fan of them already. Mm-hmm. And I went right to the front, sort of off to the side, and I sat on some grass next to a friend, because I knew I wanted to really just take it in. And I cried through the whole thing.
Wow.
And that moment, and I had this moment while I was watching that, where, oh my God, I'm getting choked up now. That's so crazy. Where I was like, it's this. It's this it's this thing that's happening right now. Yeah. Whatever the energy exchange is, whatever the magic is, whatever the thing is that makes people see themselves in the music, or the music changes something in them, it's the connection there. Yeah. That's the reason. You know?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Wow. Well, I think that's a great place to wrap it up. But I thank you for joining me, and I always really enjoy hearing people's story and people's perspective on things. And so like I say, I was excited to have the opportunity to sit down with you today.
Thank you.
And,
I was excited too. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. So thank you again, Sonia, and I look forward to seeing you on stage again. Let's hope more and more as things start to open up again from COVID. So thank you again.
Thank you.